Brian Murphy joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. You recognize Brian Murphy, WRAL investigative reporter. You can follow him on Twitter at Murph's Turf. That's spelled with a PH, Murph's Turf. Brian, appreciate you for taking the time. I want to talk about the podcast that we're both a part of. But first, that's a little tease in the business. But first, you're doing some reporting on the UNC System and their board of governors taking over. I don't even know if it's taking over is the proper word. This is such a 2024 college sports conversation. Has to do with realignment. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. Who is the UNC System, and how much power do they have over the future of college sports in North Carolina?
Yeah, so the UNC, people hear UNC and they think North Carolina, but the UNC System is in charge of all 16 public schools in the state, from Pembroke, UNC Pembroke, through UNC Asheville, Appalachian State, all the way up to UNC and NC State. So they have a lot of power. And what they've done is basically given themselves, and they took the power themselves, they've given themselves veto power over any conference moves that any school wants to make. That includes UNC and NC State. The chancellor of the school, so say UNC wants to go to the SEC, they'll have to present a plan to the board. The president will get to say yes or no. And even if the president says yes, then the board of governors, which is 24 members, all political appointees, will then get a chance to say yes or no as well. So a lot of people say, oh, this is tying UNC and NC State together. It doesn't do that, but it does give this board tremendous power to decide the athletic futures of every school in the state.
Now, I don't want to say why do they want that power, because, as we all know, in politics, it seems to be like a hungry hippo situation where everybody wants all the power they can get. But, why are they the ones suited with such a big decision? These realignment decisions are massive for the health of conferences and university sports programs. Why wouldn't you leave these to each individual university to make the decision that's best for them?
I think we saw this in California, right? When UCLA left, but Cal was going to be left behind in a crumbling Pac-12, and the decision of UCLA is going to impact another school in the California system. Well, same thing here, right? If UNC were to leave the ACC, that may lead to a crumbling ACC, and suddenly you're putting another flagship type university in NC State in a terrible financial position. And so since they're responsible for the health and well-being of the entire system, I think they felt like the buck should stop with them. They should get the final say. My biggest question, and I have not really gotten an answer, is when you're presented with a financial plan, and that's what the chancellor would have to do, are they looking, how does this financial plan impact UNC? Or are they looking, how does this financial plan impact all of the schools in our system, including NC State? Because I think you might get two very different answers depending on which question you're asking.
How much of this is what you referenced, NC State and UNC? Because in our previous conversations, we've talked about it. Other schools within the UNC system have moved conferences, and nobody said, I need veto power. And that now all of a sudden there's been some flirtations, or at least some, rumors about one of the ACC schools maybe being courted or being on some wish list for some other conference. Now all of a sudden veto power is necessary. How much of this is about NC State and UNC under the guise of being about all 16 different schools?
I would say 100%. Appalachian State, ECU, Charlotte have all switched conferences, and nobody was rushing out to figure out if it made financial sense for them. I think, the other thing is that the state is very invested in the ACC. We've seen all the championships that are coming. The ACC is a big economic driver with the top, the basketball tournament, the football championship game. If the ACC were to collapse, that's even bigger than just, NC State and UNC. So I think there's a lot of competing interests here. When push comes to shove, it will be super interesting to see, are you willing to hold back a school from making $30 million annually more, $40 million annually more, in order to protect another school? Are you willing to cut some kind of agreement like California did, where UCLA has to give Cal a little bit of money? Or, can you use this as political leverage to get both of these schools into a conference like the SEC? It just adds another layer, another dynamic to these realignment decisions that I think we're going to be talking about for the next 5 or 6 years.
Brian Murphy, WRAL investigative reporter, joining us here on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. How quickly could this move? Because the conference realignment conversation, for me, it seems like on a Thursday, there's like a clandestine meeting in Fargo, North Dakota. And then by Saturday, it's leaking that it's happening. And then Monday morning, it's, official team Twitters are putting out their new conference affiliations. Could this move that quickly, if need be, to make these decisions?
That's one of my other big questions. Like, this is dynamic conference realignment is very dynamic. We saw what happened with the Pac-12. How quick can a government body that has to hold open meetings for some of this stuff move? Can they move fast enough to keep up? I would think that if a conference wants to add North Carolina or North Carolina State, that a 24-hour delay or a 48-hour delay is not going to change their mind. I mean, we're talking about 50-year decisions, although conference realignment seems to be 10-year decisions. But I don't think a day or two for the Board of Governors to give their final approval is gonna mess that up. What could mess it up is like, oh, hey, you got to present us a new financial plan, and now it starts dragging, and whatever league says, hey, we're just going to grab someone else. Like, we don't need all this headache. So it does present some interesting, challenges if and when the time comes that one of these schools wants to move.
Well, that's an interesting, that last part, right? There's some reporting being done today that I think the term being used is a new college football playoff format is being socialized, which I think just means talked about. But that was, I think Ross Dellinger was the reporter on that report. That would, the format, I guess, would include one less automatic bid for the ACC than the SEC and the Big Ten would get. They'd each get 3. The ACC would get 2. Will teams want out if that happens? Could all of this be because you're seeing, maybe more and more reasons for teams to want out of the ACC?
Yeah, I think this presents an interesting, decision for the ACC. Like, if you say we only get 2 and those leagues get 3, you're telling everyone, television partners, recruits, coaches, the schools themselves that are in your conference, hey, we're not worth as much as they are. On the other hand, if you don't take this deal, the SEC and the Big Ten can just take their ball and go home. So it really puts the ACC in a bind. The other thing is, everyone kind of knows that already, right? Everyone kind of knows the ACC is not on the same level as the other leagues. So, are you really taking a step back by doing it? I was a little bit surprised they didn't give the Big 12 and the ACC 3 spots and say you each get your champion in, and then the next highest ranked among your group.
3 combined.
3 combined as opposed to 4 combined. And that would open up another spot for an at-large, which in theory would go to the SEC and Big Ten. Like, they hold all the cards here, and so you get a real sense. And now they're going to get more of the payouts too, a higher percentage of the payouts. And so if you're a Florida State, you're really like, what are we doing here? We got to get out of this league. But if you're like an NC State or a Virginia Tech, you might be like, hey, there are 2 spots, 2 chances to get in the playoff. That really helps our chances of making the college football playoff. So I do think it leads to maybe some different decisions at different levels of the conference.
Brian Murphy, WRAL investigative reporter. Brian, a little bit of a shameless self-promotion here. You and I are on a podcast that's coming out March 11th, A Brief History of Triangle Sports. It's a new season on how sports gambling became legal and the whole lead up and all the votes and everything that took place for it to get here. I have to admit, I get to kind of be the passenger in this one, with so much of it was on the back of your research. How much research, how many interviews did you really pack into these 4 episodes that are going to drop on March 11th?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I've been covering this for a long time, probably 3 or 4 years. This stretches all the way back to the Supreme Court's decision in 2018, and we've kind of taken the podcast even further back into some of North Carolina's history. I think I did about 12 interviews, including with the governor, in the executive mansion, and a lot of WRAL news clips in there as well. I'm super excited about it, and the news keeps coming. Right, today they announced which sports books will be operating in North Carolina by March 11th. So this is all happening. It happened very slowly, and now it's happening very quickly.
And I think it's all very, as you mentioned, all those interviews, the different personalities, they tell the story quite well, and we get to have some fun kind of weaving in and out of it with the storytelling. So that'll be coming out March 11th. Everybody look for it everywhere podcasts can be found, wherever you subscribe. A Brief History of Triangle Sports. It'll be season 3, I believe, all on legal sports gambling in North Carolina. And you can also find it on our YouTube page, 99.9 The Fan. It'll live there as well. Brian, anything I'm missing that they need to know about the pod? Sometimes I know it so well that I breeze over it. Is there anything else?
Yeah, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the episodes when they come out, and we touch on things like the Dixie Classic and the debate over the lottery and how sports gambling kind of got its start here in the state. This legalization push. I think you'll find all these stories pretty interesting, and we've talked to a lot of people who are experts and who were in the room when it happened. So really excited for everyone to get a chance to listen to that.
That's Brian Murphy. Brian, appreciate you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Tim.
Brian Murphy, WRAL investigative reporter. Again, follow him on Twitter at Murph's Turf. That's Murph, spelled with a PH, S, Turf, spelled with a PH again there. That's his Twitter handle.
A lot of interesting stuff coming in that when it comes to like the ACC and realignment. And something that Murph brought up that I did not expect was the state of North Carolina as a whole, like as an entity, has a lot riding on the ACC because the ACC conference has their championships. The next 5 years for the ACC basketball tournament are Charlotte, Greensboro, Charlotte, Greensboro, Charlotte.
It sounds...
And then the ACC football championship, too.
It sounds much more difficult to explain if you're like, no, they're going to block the UNC from joining the SEC because of NC State. It sounds a bit more plausible to say they're going to block UNC from joining the SEC to protect NC State and the massive event that comes to Greensboro every other year and the massive events that come to Charlotte every year and the massive amounts of tourists and everything else that come into town for those games. And it's going, oh, okay, it's not just NC State and UNC are handcuffed together. There's other reasons why North Carolina politicians and elected officials and legislators might be inclined to protect the ACC, and even if that might be at the detriment of one of its members.